And actually, speaking of slow fire here, we were talking about it. Is there something? I mean, there are a lot of books that I would say are very similar. A lot of authors that I said, T. Jefferson Parker, I think is very similar to your writing. I think James Newburgh is very similar to the writing in the subject matter of what you're doing. Is there the germ of this story? Is there a catalyst for this? Is this based on anything in particular, or is this kind of a combination of a bunch of stories you've read?
You mean the idea for the book?
The idea for the book, yeah.
The idea for the book came from, I moved to California in 1986. I grew up in New Jersey, and obviously if you grew up in New Jersey, Northern California looks a lot different, so I was pretty fascinated by the place, and I spent a lot of time just driving around the back roads of Northern California. And I started to take large format, photography, and so I would just drive the back. This was before I had a kid. I'd drive the back roads of Northern California, and one day I found this incredible town in rural Northern California, probably about 4 hours from the Bay Area, and it was exactly the kind of town when you drive the back roads of any place that you hope to find. It was just this small, isolated town. It was formed during the gold rush, and it was perfectly preserved, but not in a fancy. It was just they'd never knocked down a building, and it had a drugstore that had been continuously operating since 1890, and it still had a soda fountain and penny candy. And on 4th of July, they had the perfect 4th of July parade with Shriners and little cars and bunting up the buildings, and of course people on horseback. And so I started taking my family there for July 4th. They also had fireworks on the high school football field there. And we'd start to go back every year for July 4th. And in 2006, on July 4th, we pulled into this town, and I just had this sense, I don't know if anybody else has ever had a sense, you just show up in a place and every part of your being is just screaming, get out now. And there was nobody on the street, and it just, this town I've been going to just had this really creepy feeling. And then nobody was on the streets, and the drugstore, which had been continually operating since 1890, was boarded up.
So this isn't a year, so you were there for 4th of July the year before?
I think I've been there for 2 years.
Okay.
And we went to the fireworks that night, and under the garish red, white, and blue exploding fireworks, these people who did show up for the fireworks had this really sinister aspect, and to kind of lump them all together, they were emaciated and missing teeth, or had rotting teeth in prominent positions in their mouth. They had sores, almost like biblical boils on their faces. And I said to my wife, I said, what happened to these people? And she said, meth. And, you know, I had known what methamphetamine was, but I had no idea about the new meth that started to become popular in around 2004, 2005, crystal meth. And I went home and hopped on Google, mostly just so I could tell her she was wrong, and without too much work, I found a Department of Justice document that right outside this town, the DEA had busted a methamphetamine super lab that was hidden in the national forest outside this town. And I started doing more research on this new meth, which I found pretty interesting. And I like the idea of this completely isolated town. And the idea is kind of like Invasion of the Body Snatchers, but instead of some pods from outer space, crystal meth taking over this isolated town. And the other idea I like, I saw it as kind of like the Clint Eastwood movies, like High Plains Drifters, where this isolated town being taken over by this evil influence, and the lone hero who has to try to save it.
And is this